There is a question that historians have debated for centuries. How did a city built on 7 hills beside a muddy river in central Italy come to dominate the entire known world for over 500 years? The answer most people give is legions, discipline, engineering, and they are not wrong. But there is another answer, one that is rarely spoken about, one that goes deeper than swords and siege engines. Rome controlled the world's gold, not just by hoarding it, not just by mining it, but through a system deliberate, sophisticated, and ruthless that ensured the entire global economy ran on Roman terms. This is the story of that system, how it was built, how it worked, and how, in the end, Rome's obsession with gold became the very thing that destroyed it. To understand what Rome built, you first have to understand the world it entered. Gold has been the ultimate symbol of power since the earliest human civilizations. The Egyptians buried their pharaohs in it. The Persians used it to cement alliances and pay mercenaries. The Greeks minted it into coins that traveled across the Mediterranean world. But before Rome's rise, gold power was fragmented. No single civilization controlled enough of it, or enough of the roots that moved it to truly dominate global economics. The Persian Empire, at its height, sat on vast treasuries. When Alexander the Great sacked Persepolis in 330 BC, he reportedly captured so much gold and silver that it took 20,000 mules and 5,000 camels to carry it away. And yet, within a generation of Alexander's death, that wealth had scattered. His successors, the Ptolemies, the Seleucids, the rulers of Macedonia, each grabbed what they could. The gold fragmented with the empire. This fragmentation was not a weakness the ancient world ever found a solution to, until Rome. What Rome understood instinctively at first, then with deliberate strategic clarity, was that gold alone was not power. What mattered was controlling the system through which gold moved. The mines, the mints, the roads, the trade routes, the currency itself. Control all of those, and you don't just have gold. You have something far more powerful. You have the ability to decide who else gets to have it. Let us begin where Rome's gold story truly begins, not in the Forum, not in the Senate, but underground. In the mountains of northwestern Spain, there is a landscape unlike anything else on Earth. Vast towers of red and orange rock rise from the valley floor, sculpted into impossible shapes. Ancient chestnut forests cling to the slopes. From above, it looks almost alien. This is Las Medulas, and it is the scar left by the most ambitious mining operation in the ancient world. When Rome conquered the Iberian Peninsula, what we call Spain and Portugal today, they didn't just find land. They found the richest gold and silver deposits in the Western Mediterranean, and they did not mine them gently. Roman engineers developed a technique they called ruina montium, literally, the ruin of mountains. Here is how it worked. First, workers, many of them slaves, laboring in conditions we can barely imagine, carved an elaborate network of tunnels into the base of a mountain. These weren't small shafts. At Las Medulas, archaeologists have mapped over 200 kilometers of tunnels, some stretching for miles inside the rock. Then, the Romans built enormous reservoirs high on the hillsides above. Aqueducts, some stretching 100 kilometers, fed these reservoirs continuously from distant rivers. When the engineers were ready, they opened the sluices. Millions of liters of water crashed through the tunnel network in an instant, and the mountain collapsed from within. The debris washed away down purpose-built channels, and Roman workers sifted through what remained, collecting the raw gold ore. To give you a sense of the scale, geologists estimate that Roman miners moved over 500 million cubic meters of earth at Las Medulas alone over the centuries of operation. And Hispania was only one piece of the picture. In Dacia, modern Romania, the mines of the Transylvanian mountains held some of the richest gold veins in the ancient world. In Numidia and Mauritania, North Africa, gold and silver flowed north toward Roman refineries. In Britain, newly conquered, Roman engineers immediately surveyed for mineral wealth. The gold mines of Donaghadee in Wales were producing within years of the invasion. In Egypt, the grain basket of the empire, but also something more. Rome inherited centuries of desert gold mining from the Ptolemies and expanded it. At the system's peak, Historians estimate the Roman Empire was producing somewhere between 5 and 9 metric tons of gold per year from its mines alone. That is before conquest, before taxation, before trade. The mines were the foundation, but Rome's control of gold went far deeper. Here is something that Roman senators understood very clearly, something that is easy to miss when we study Rome as a military story rather than an economic one. War, for Rome, was not just about territory, it was an investment. When the Roman Senate voted to go to war, the calculation was not purely strategic or political. It was financial. The question was always, will the wealth captured exceed the cost of the campaign? And for Rome's greatest conquests, the answer was almost always overwhelmingly yes. Let us look at the numbers. When Rome defeated Carthage in the Third Punic War in 146 BC, they did not just destroy a rival. They looted one of the wealthiest cities in the Mediterranean and enslaved its entire surviving population, over 50,000 people sold at auction. When Lucius Aemilius Paulus defeated Perseus of Macedon at the Battle of Pydna in 168 BC, he returned to Rome with so much gold and silver that the Roman citizens were for a time exempted from paying any direct taxes at all. One general's victory had financed the entire Roman state. And then there was Dacia. When Emperor Trajan completed his conquest of Dacia in 106 AD, he brought back to Rome what ancient sources describe as approximately 165 tons of gold and 330 tons of silver. 165 tons of gold. To put that figure in modern terms, at today's gold prices, that single haul would be worth over 10 billion US dollars. And Trajan spent it with breathtaking ambition. The Forum of Trajan, one of the most magnificent building complexes the ancient world had ever seen. The Column of Trajan, still standing today. Public games lasting 123 days, in which over 11,000 animals were killed. Grain distributions to the Roman poor. Rome had turned conquest into a gold generation machine, and every successful campaign fed the next, funding the armies, the equipment, the logistics that made the following campaign possible. War begat gold, gold begat war. It was a cycle Rome rode for centuries. But of all the tools Rome used to control global gold, the most elegant and the most powerful was a small gold disc that fit in the palm of your hand, the Aureus. Introduced by Julius Caesar and refined under Augustus, the Aureus was a masterpiece of monetary engineering. It weighed approximately 8 grams of nearly pure gold, and crucially, it maintained that weight and purity with remarkable consistency across decades and emperors. That consistency was not accidental, it was deliberate policy. Rome understood something that most ancient civilizations did not. A currency is only as powerful as the trust people place in it. The Roman mint, the moneta, from which our word money derives, operated under strict imperial oversight. Coin weights were tested. Counterfeiters faced brutal punishment. The purity of the Aureus was, for generations, beyond question. And this reputation transformed the Aureus into something extraordinary. It became the reserve currency of the ancient world. Think of how the US dollar functions today. Nations that have no political relationship with America still price oil in dollars, hold dollar reserves, and conduct international trade in dollars. This gives the United States enormous economic leverage, the ability to essentially export inflation, to borrow cheaply, to exert financial pressure without firing a single shot. The Aureus did the same thing for Rome 2,000 years earlier. Egyptian merchants needed Aureus coins to trade in the Eastern Mediterranean. Parthian kings paid their debts in Roman gold. Indian spice merchants in the great port of Barigaza on the western coast of India accepted Aureus coins as eagerly as local currency. And here is the remarkable evidence of just how far Rome's monetary reach extended. Archaeologists have found hordes of Roman Aureus coins minted in Rome in modern-day India, Vietnam, the Korean Peninsula, Eastern Africa, deep inside Central Asia. The furthest confirmed find of a Roman coin is over 7,000 kilometers from Rome. Roman legions never reached those places. Roman governors never administered those territories. But Roman gold did, because the world ran on Rome's terms. Currency was one pillar of Rome's gold dominance. Trade was the other. And here, Rome's genius was geographic as much as political. At the height of the empire, the Mediterranean Sea was, functionally, a Roman lake. Every major port on its coastline, from Carthage to Alexandria to Antioch to Massalia, was under Roman control or Roman influence. Roman war galleys patrolled the shipping lanes. Roman harbor masters collected customs duties. Move goods by sea in the ancient world, and you moved through Rome. But Rome's reach didn't stop at the water. The Roman road network, over 85,000 kilometers of paved, surveyed, maintained roads, connected every corner of the empire into a single economic system. These roads are famous for moving armies, but their deeper purpose was moving commerce. Roman merchants could ship goods from Britain to Syria with a speed and reliability that would not be matched in Europe for over 1,000 years. And at every choke point on every major route, mountain passes, river crossings, port entrances, Roman customs agents collected their percentage. The Portoria Rome's customs tax system extracted between 2% and 5% of the value of goods crossing provincial boundaries. It sounds modest. Applied to the staggering volume of trade flowing through Roman territory, it generated enormous revenues. But the subtlest and most profitable piece of Rome's trade strategy was its role as middleman. The great luxury trade of the ancient world flowed between East and West: Chinese silk, Indian spices, Arabian incense, African ivory. These were goods that wealthy Romans craved, and that wealthy Romans could pay for in gold. The problem, from an economic standpoint, was that this trade ran in one direction. Rome bought from the East far more than it sold. Gold flowed eastward. Rome's solution was elegant and ruthless. Rather than simply participating in this trade, Rome positioned itself to own the infrastructure of the trade. Roman merchants, backed by Roman law, protected by Roman military power, operating from Roman-controlled ports, inserted themselves as the essential intermediaries. Chinese silk passed through Central Asian middlemen, through Parthian territory, then into Roman Syria, where Roman merchants added their margin before selling it to Roman aristocrats. Indian spices arrived at the port of Alexandria, Rome's greatest trading hub, where Roman tax collectors took their cut. Roman merchants warehoused the goods, and Roman ships carried them westward. The markup at each stage of this chain was significant, and Rome captured a piece of every single transaction. The Roman Empire was not merely an economy. It was a machine designed, at its deepest level, to funnel the wealth of the world toward a single city. But no machine runs forever. By the middle of the 3rd century AD, something had gone deeply wrong inside the Roman economic engine. The symptoms were visible everywhere: prices rising, merchants hoarding old coins and refusing new ones, soldiers demanding payment in kind rather than in currency, tax revenues falling even as tax rates rose. What had happened? The answer lay in the coins themselves. The Roman silver denarius, the backbone of everyday commerce, had once been a coin of roughly 85% pure silver. Under Augustus, under Tiberius, under the great emperors of the 1st and 2nd centuries, it held its value. The Roman economy trusted it. But by the reign of Septimius Severus, at the turn of the 3rd century, the denarius had already been quietly reduced to around 50% silver. By the 260s AD, the chaos of the crisis of the 3rd century, when Rome cycled through dozens of emperors in just a few decades, the denarius had fallen to barely 2 to 5% silver content. It was bronze with a thin silver wash, a lie stamped with an emperor's face. This was not incompetence, it was desperation. The military pressures of the 3rd century were unlike anything Rome had previously faced. Simultaneous invasions on multiple frontiers, constant civil wars between rival claimants to the throne. Each new emperor needing to pay loyal legions quickly, generously, or face assassination. The treasury was empty. The mines were not producing enough. The conquest dividend, the great floods of plunder that had funded Rome for centuries, had largely dried up. There were no new dacias to conquer. So emperors did what desperate governments have always done. They printed more money. They debased the coinage, and the Roman economy knew. Merchants who had spent generations trusting the denarius looked at the new coins lighter, grayer, cheaper, and made a calculation. The old pure silver coins disappeared from circulation, hoarded under floorboards and buried in fields. Historians call this Gresham's Law. Bad money drives out good. Prices doubled, then doubled again. Ancient papyri from Egypt record grain prices rising 5-0-fold between 200 AD and 300 AD. The legions who had once proudly accepted Roman silver now demanded gold. Pure gold, paid directly, or goods, or land. And here is the terrible irony at the heart of Rome's story. The system that Rome had built, the system of monetary trust, of currency dominance, of a world economy running on Roman gold, was so powerful that when Rome began to erode it, the entire structure began to shake. Because trust, once lost, is almost impossible to rebuild. The 4th century emperors understood the crisis. Some of them tried to fix it. Diocletian attempted a sweeping economic reform, the Edict on Maximum Prices in 301 AD, an attempt to use the force of law to stop inflation. Merchants simply ignored it or went underground. The edict failed. Constantine, in the early 4th century, introduced a new gold coin, the solidus, of reliably high purity, and remarkably, it held. The solidus became a trusted currency that lasted, in various forms, for over 1,000 years in the Byzantine world. But the solidus could not undo the deeper damage. The Western Empire was bleeding gold in a new way, now not through debasement, but through tribute. Rome had, in its declining decades, developed a habit that would have horrified Augustus or Trajan. Rather than defeating its enemies in the field, Rome increasingly paid them to go away. The Visigoth leader Alaric was paid hundreds of kilograms of gold to retreat multiple times before finally sacking Rome in 410 AD when the payments stopped. Attila the Hun extracted enormous gold tribute payments from the Eastern Empire at one point, demanding 700 kilograms of gold per year, then doubling it when he felt like it. The world's greatest gold extraction machine had become a machine that bled gold to its enemies. When the Western Roman Empire finally fell in 476 AD, the vaults beneath the Roman Forum, once among the most stocked treasuries in human history, were, largely, empty. The gold had gone to the legions, to the barbarian warlords, to the endless emergencies of a civilization trying to hold itself together with payments rather than power. The Aureus, that small gold disc that had once colonized the economy of the known world, was gone too. The secret machine had finally stopped. Rome's story with gold is, in the end, a story about something deeply human. The desire not just to have wealth, but to control the system through which wealth flows. For over 5 centuries, Rome managed to do exactly that. It industrialized extraction on a scale the ancient world had never seen. It engineered a currency so trusted that merchants 7,000 kilometers from Rome used it to settle debts. It positioned itself at the center of global trade, so that the wealth of silk roads and spice routes poured, ultimately, toward the city on the Tiber. And then slowly, then suddenly, it undermined the very foundations that made all of it possible. The debasement of the coinage was not just an economic blunder. It was an act of self-destruction. It broke the trust that had made Roman gold worth more than the metal it was made from. And that, perhaps, is the deepest lesson Rome left behind. Gold is not wealth. Gold is trust made tangible. The moment Rome forgot that, the moment it began treating its currency as a tool for short-term survival rather than long-term power, the empire's fate was already written. The coin stopped spinning, and the world moved on. If you found yourself wondering what happened to all that Roman gold after the fall, where it went, who took it, and whether any of it survives today, that is exactly the story we are covering next. Make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss it. And if you enjoyed this video, I think you'll love the one on Rome's 15 tons of gold, the single greatest treasure seizure in the ancient world. It's right here. I'll see you in the next one.